Greetings and welcome to Season 2, Episode 1 of the Sustaining the Herd podcast brought to you by Agri-Services and Engineering of Raymond, Nebraska. I'm Andrew Wadle. I'm joined in the studio by my co-host Brock Vitek, as well as our special guest, Katie Dotterer of AgvoKate. And we're going to learn a lot about Katie and everything that she does as an advocate for agriculture. But before we get into that, just wanted to say Happy New Year and welcome to all of our new visitors to Sustaining the Herd. And thank you very much for all of our past listeners. And for our new listeners, just to kind of let you know a little bit about Sustaining the Herd, what we're doing is we're talking about everything involving sustainability and agriculture. And well, what does sustainability mean to us at Agri-Services and Engineering? Well, it means environmental sustainability, and that is we want to be having clean air and clean water and coexisting with agriculture and society in general. We want to be utilizing all of our natural resources, again, keeping our natural resources clean. We want to be caring for our animals and doing all the right things when it comes to cow comfort and animal comfort and getting the most out of the animals that are within our care. And then the final part, but surely there's more to talk about, is the sustainability of businesses. And whether that's financial sustainability, employees. And so all of these things are rolled into what we view as sustainability when it comes to sustainability and animal agriculture and agricultural production in general. And when you boil it right down, what amazes us is that agriculture is the greatest recycling system and one of the most sustainable systems on the planet. So with that, again, I want to welcome our special guest, Katie Dotterer of AgvoKate. And Katie, please introduce yourself and tell us about AgvoKate.
Well, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here on your podcast. My name is Katie Dotterer. I put the Kate in AgvoKate, if you get it. Some people don't get it right off.
Very, very clever.
Thank you. I rebranded a couple years ago. So, my background is I've been a dairy farmer my entire life for 30 some years, really up until about 3 years ago when I had to step away. And so I grew up in a family dairy that is still in operation today in central Pennsylvania. And if you would have asked me in high school, Katie, what do you want to do with your life? I was like, be part of the third generation. And I was for almost 2 years until I decided to leave and start my own farm. That was a crazy idea. So I went from being a third generation dairy farmer to a first generation dairy farmer, co-owned my own dairy for about 13 years. And in the midst of all of that, I created AgvoKate. I didn't have that name, but this was really a side hustle that I just turned into a full-time career within the last 2.5 years. So I do a myriad of things. I advocate for agriculture, so I work on contract with PR companies across the US. But the biggest thing that I do is language learning for agriculture. And that is teaching online Spanish for agriculture and also ESL, which is English as a second language. All of my students are adults. They are from coast to coast, from California to Delaware to Canada. And it's been a really fun journey thus far. And so that's a bit of what I do.
Well, that's really exciting. And it really, what you're going to talk about weaves very much into all phases of agriculture, all commodities and whatnot. I've read some of your blogs, and I'd like you to relate a story to our audience, because this does speak to the business sustainability side of things. And that is, can you tell the story of what I'm making in air quotes, the vote?
About not being able to go home.
Yeah, because I think this really is a great indication of how we're talking about agricultural businesses, and businesses make hard decisions, and even if it involves family. And so that's a little bit of a spoiler, but please tell our audience about the vote.
Yeah, the vote is, the vote was I could not come home. So to this day, it is the most popular blog that is being read on my website, and it says, I think the title is "Who Says You Can't Go Home?" Like the I think it's Bon Jovi song. My family said I couldn't come home. So This happened back in 2017. My life kind of started falling apart, and I didn't know what to do. I had my own dairy. I was working 5 different jobs, and so naturally, I asked it was a conversation first with my father, and I'm going to pause here, and because I have to give you a little bit of a background on the family farm. So it is a large dairy. My family's milking about 1,000 cows right now, and have about 40 employees. They're very diversified. They do custom TMR sales. They do custom harvesting, in addition to the dairy. So I was like, there's got to be room for me, right? There was room when I was there. So I didn't know what to do. And so I asked my dad in a time of despair, really. I was like, can I come home? And I remember it distinctly because he said, well, I'm going to have to run it by the family. We're going to have to vote on it. And I'm like, what? Okay. So a couple days later, the family voted on it, and the vote was no. No, Katie, you cannot come home. So people, when I first put this blog out there, it resonated with some, but it also pissed off a lot of people. And it really opened up a lot of good conversations with people, especially family businesses. I don't care if you're a farmer or you're not. Family businesses are tough. And my family, so let me go back to, did it hurt? Absolutely. But I didn't stew on it. I was hurt for about, I'm going to say 48 hours. Because the way we were raised in my family was that farm was a business first. I don't know how else to explain it other than like it was ingrained in us since we were little. Like, yeah, it's a farm, but it's also a business, and we're going to run it like a business. And I'm very proud of my family in the fact that they've always had a succession plan in place. They continue to work on that, especially with the 4th generation starting to come on here and there. So they're very progressive in a lot of different areas. And when I hear about like some farms that aren't, I'm like, how are you not? Like, why do you not want to protect this for the next generation? Now, I will say I'm the oldest. So I have a younger brother and sister. They are both at home on the farm. And so that's my dad's side of the family. Dad has a brother, and my uncle also has 3 children. So I want you to picture like a visual, if you will. So 3 kids for each 3rd generation. My uncle's 3, 2 of them were also there, but the oldest was off farm. So what they did to make it fair was to say, okay, Katie, we voted that you can't come back, but neither can your oldest cousin. So it was fair on both sides. That's what I think people glaze over when they read that article. So was I hurt? Yes, but I got over it really quickly. And I will say, it's not that the conversation didn't stop there. I remember going home, I think it was for Christmas that year, and my immediate family, so just my mom, my dad, my brother and sister, and I had it was like a post-Christmas kitchen meeting. And my brother was the one that spoke up and said, well, what if she came back in a different capacity? And Dad said, I don't care what you guys do, but we have to vote on it regardless. Like, this is still a family business. You're in this business with multiple family members. So obviously that never came to fruition, which I'm okay with. Like, I respect their decision. I respect my family. I love my family, but I love what I do right now. And so my brother, it's funny because he always jokes about me still coming home, and I'm like, yeah, I'm good for now. But I learned to never say never, but I absolutely love what I'm doing right now.
That's a great story.
Thanks for all of that, Katie. Jumping back into what you do with AgvoKate, I'd like to ask if you could explain the demographic makeup of today's production agriculture workforce, and if you could get into which specific agricultural industries or sectors where we find immigrant or migrant labor.
That's easy. All over. In the U.S. agriculture industry as a whole, okay, it's general. 78% of agricultural workers speak Spanish. That is huge, 78%. And I know that's probably going to shock a lot of your listeners, which it should, because I don't think some people think it's that high, but it is. It's 78%. And trust me, I keep up with the stats because I give presentations on this topic all the time. So it's important for me to make sure my number is correct. But yeah, 78%. And they are from all over Latin America. Most are from Mexico, but I don't ever let people forget that there are others from Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, you name it. that are here as well. So that's the demographic in the agricultural workforce.
Do you see that breaking down a bit differently across some more specific sectors, say livestock versus crop and produce production, or slaughterhouses, food processing, etc.? Can you give
That's
us any insight there?
That's a really, really interesting question. And I have tried myself to get pinpointed stats on that. So that really depends on the industry, because you have the produce industry who utilizes the H-2A and the H-2B visa programs. You have the swine industry that utilizes the TN visa programs, which is a very different program than your H-2A and H-2B. Then you have dairy, where we're just going to take whoever comes, because trying to find somebody to milk cows is pretty much impossible. I have been on the employer end of it, and I could tell you stories. So but as you might know, we can't utilize a visa program in the dairy industry because we are not seasonal. We are all year round. I'm hoping that dairy is able to learn more and adopt the TN visa programs, because I've heard a lot of successes with that. So it really depends on the industry and the visa program, or the visas that people can come here on. And just to be clear, visas it's a government contract between the country and the U.S. government. So they are here legally, they're just not here permanently. And the government keeps a very, very close, very close tabs on everybody and their locations.
Thanks for that insight and clarification. I just learned a few things there as you explained the visa program, and I imagine some of our listeners appreciate now having a better understanding of that too.
And can you just describe the difference between those two visas?
Yep. So the H2A, H2B, I'm going to lump them together. Those are for seasonal. So a lot of your produce, veggie, fruit growers utilize those. And that's because after, 6 months or however long a growing season is, they have to go back to their country. They do, if they behaved while they're here, they are eligible to come back. The TN visa program is one that I'm still learning about, because I currently teach a group of Hispanics English, and that program, you have to have a college education. You have to have a college degree to have the TN visa to come to work in the US. Those contracts are usually 3 years at a time. Now, within those 3 years, there are stipulations where you have to go back to your country. So, for example, all of my students right now are from Mexico. They have to go back to Mexico for at least 2 weeks every year. Usually just, to visit family, to make sure that they're liking their work in the US, that they want to come back. H2A, H2B, you do not have to have any type of education. So it's, I hate to say it's a different caliber, but sometimes it is. And that's also depending on what an employer wants, right? So the majority of the students I currently teach with the TN visa programs, they're actually veterinarians in Mexico. They cannot practice as veterinarians here because the schooling and credentials are very different. But it really depends on what type of worker you want, what skills they need to have, because some of my students are working in the laboratories at a boar stud facility here in Pennsylvania.
So for our listeners, I think we're starting to kind of dig into one of the reasons why we wanted to have Katie on, to talk about her experiences, and as it relates particularly to immigrant labor. And the purpose of this wasn't to be political in any way, but the fact of the matter is that it's astounding. It's really astounding to think that say more or less 78% of the food that you will eat today or have eaten today, Hispanic labor was involved in bringing that to you. And so to say we want a certain segment of people to be sent home or to not be part of America's, would be putting a lot of things at risk, wouldn't it?
And I would just add real quick, I would argue that it's higher than that, because that is not taking into consideration any of the undocumented people that are here that are still involved in agriculture, whether we like it or not.
Right. So just speaking of Hispanic labor in general, we're all different. They're from different part of the world. They were raised different. Can you just tell us about how Hispanic workers approach work different than, say, Americans would?
Absolutely. This is actually a part that I teach about in my classes. I teach culture as well, because it's really important to know these things. You can't just expect somebody from a completely different country to just assimilate into American culture, especially if it's their first time here. One of the biggest differences is they are very task oriented. They just like to be told what to do and they go do it. And it's not that they don't work, they can't work together as a team, but they don't grow up that way. So I actually just had a guest speaker from Honduras come into my Spanish classes to actually talk on this topic. And I was surprised to learn, I'm always learning. He said that he has kids here now in the US, and he said, I am astounded from a young age, the amount of group projects that kids work on. He's like, we don't do that in Honduras. That's not a Latin American thing. Like, they're very family oriented, right? But that's just not what they grow up doing. So when they come here to the US and they have to work together as a team, that's a novel concept for a lot of people. So that really needs to be taken into consideration if you are, planning to have a Spanish speaker on your team, but they maybe don't know how to work together as a team. They just want to kind of put blinders on, and I don't say that in a bad way, but put blinders on and just do the task that you're asking them to do. Another big one that I would love to share with you quick is promotion. So even on dairy, right? If you think somebody is really good and they should be the herds person at this dairy, they're not going to come to you and say, hey, I think I'm ready to move up. They are only going to make that next step unless they get that go ahead from an authoritative figure. Like, you need to tell them, hey, I want you to be a herds person. And give them the option, because sometimes if you say, hey, I think you'd be great, they're like, okay, I'll do it, but maybe they don't really want to do it. So where we as Americans would like jump at the chance to add a promotion or to, climb the rungs, they're just like, I don't want to do it unless I get the go ahead from somebody that I respect up here.
Interesting. So how do you approach something like, I'll take something that I'm sure you know well, say milking cows. You're in a milking parlor and everybody is pulling together to a common goal of a sub 125,000 somatic cell. What do you do in that case? They have to work as a team in order. One person alone could turn that upside down, right?
Right. One of the best ways to do that is to have a meeting, and that meeting needs to be in Spanish and English, right? So if your team are both English and Spanish speakers, it needs to be in both. That's really the biggest reason why I do what I do, and I've created the programs that I did, is because people think, and I love Spanglish, I have nothing against Spanglish, but if you're not going to put the time in to like learn how to say somatic cell count, which by the way is really easy, they're never going to, one, respect you the way you should be respected, and vice versa. So communication's a big one there, and explaining it. That is the biggest thing. And I don't care where anybody is from or what language you speak. Sometimes we forget that you can't just tell somebody to do something. I'm one of those people. If you tell me to do something, I want to know why. I'm not just going to go do it. And I get kind of some flack from some people, my mother being one of them. But I'm just like, I'm very curious. And people by nature, so if we're trying to lower the somatic cell count, well, why? Why is it a problem of where it's at? Why do you want to decrease it? What are going to be the benefits, right? Because I'll never forget when I did this the very first time, it was at my family dairy. And I was trying to explain that, it's better for the cows, it's better for the milk. And by the way, the end goal is the farmer gets more money and we can pass that money on to you, but we all have to work together. So I guess the big takeaway there is, don't just tell them to, we're going to update this protocol. This is why we're updating the protocol. This is our goal, and this is why.
Gotcha. Yeah, that is I would say an approach that really kind of works with everybody. Anybody with an inquiring mind, I'll say. If you understand it, you're more likely to do it and do it well.
Exactly.
Katie, that was a great example of what it looks like to work together across the cultural divide. I'd like to drill a bit more down into the details and now ask, what are some Hispanic communication preferences, as well as some cultural norms that farm owners and managers should know about and try to understand as they interact with their Hispanic workforce?
So right off the bat, cultural norms, know and understand their holidays. That's a huge one. I really hate the attitude of they're here, they need to learn English, or they're here, they need to celebrate our holidays. That's BS in my opinion. You are bringing them here. The least you can do is learn a little bit about their culture. Holidays are a big thing, just like they are to us, right? Think about how meaningful Christmas is to you, or maybe you're a big 4th of July person. In Hispanic culture, one of the big ones is Day of the Dead, or Dia de los Muertos. By the way, we cover all these holidays in my class as well, because it's very important.
That's a great teaser, by the way. That's a great teaser. These are the things that you can learn from Katie. Go ahead, Katie. Sorry.
Did I tell you my first degrees in marketing? So the Day of the Dead is November 1st and 2nd. I'm not going to dive all the way into it, but it's right after our Halloween. And so a lot of people make the mistake of thinking it's Mexico's Halloween, which is the furthest thing from it. And it's actually very disrespectful to them, to their culture, to assume that one. So do yourself a favor and learn about it. The best way to learn about that, by the way, is watch the movie Coco. You can find it on Disney. It's a Pixar movie. I think it's fantastic. So that's one. Another one, Christmas is also a really big one for them. So just respect it. You know, if they ask for time off with their family, try to work with them and see what you can do there. The next really big one is Pascua, or Easter. In Mexico alone, and Mexico's so big, and so it varies upon region, but the entire week, like they take an entire week off of, they call it Semana Santa, or it's Semana Santa. An entire week for Easter. Easter is a very, very sacred holiday for them. So all I ask is don't just dismiss it. And to them, it's not about the Easter bunny. It's about the actual reason. And so a big part of that is respecting that. So those are the big things I can point out to you with culture. Also their food. They love their food. And it's so funny. I heard a comedian not too long ago say about how American food is boring compared to Mexican food. And he's like, do you want proof? There's a taqueria on every street corner. You guys love salsa. Actually, salsa just surpassed America's favorite condiment. Our favorite condiment used to be ketchup. It is now salsa. And I thought that was awesome because of the influence, right? So their food, if they offer you some food, try it. You will be, I have definitely expanded my my palate through Mexican food, even though I still can't handle spicy. So the cultural things that we have, it's just a little different with them. As far as communication preferences, again, I understand the argument of they're here and they need to learn English, but if you are the employer, I feel there is onus on both parties to learn each other's language. And I'm never asking anybody to be fluent. So communication preferences, just try to learn a little bit of Spanish. It's not hard. Honestly, Spanish, and I'm not saying this because I teach it, it is one of the easiest languages to learn. It is the most phonetic, which means you spell it, or you say it the way it's spelled, unlike English with all of our stupid silent E's everywhere. So that's a big one. But I will say too, stop with the translator. Translator, this is what I tell people, and I do a presentation on Spanglish, because Spanglish is okay. As adults, we really need to take notes from kids, especially kiddos that are learning a language at a young age, because they don't care. They do not care if they mess up, and they laugh at themselves. And that's what I encourage my students to do. And so, try Spanglish. It's okay. Maybe you start out in English and you can throw a Spanish word in there. They're going to do the same thing. But with the translator, I always ask people, when you're constantly taking that out of your pocket, what message are you really sending?
Yeah, no effort.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. The message that you're sending is, I don't care. I don't care enough to take the time to learn how to say good morning. How are you? How is your family? Simple things. And it really isn't complicated. So I would say, also for communication preferences, is to write things, but you have to be careful with that because of a person's literacy level. That can really quick, really tank their self-confidence. So with H-2A, I have learned, so with not the TN visa program in the picture, but the H2A, H2B, or maybe they're here without a visa, the average education is about 5th grade. So just be careful and mindful of that.
Sure.
Yeah, that's really important. I'm sure that having confidence is pretty important in that culture. And just something else, I related a story to you about how when I was working quite a bit in South America, how the first thing people would ask you is how people who you're familiar with ask you, how's your family? It was nothing else. It was not business. It was not this. It was family. Can you speak to the fact that how important family is?
Absolutely. And this actually goes back to when I got asked about the cultural norms. That is huge. Family is everything to them. I mean, and you could argue that it is to us, but I feel like sometimes we place business and profit and all this stuff above it sometimes. But yeah, family. And I've learned this really quick with my ESL students. Again, these are the workers at a swine farm. My first 15 minutes of class, if it was a regular classroom, we would be already hitting the books. But 15 minutes with Hispanics, you're talking about family, you're having a good time, you're joking, you're asking how somebody's week was. It's very different than what we're used to. I remember distinctly on my dairy, I had a herd manager who just 4:00 in the morning would come in that milking parlor and just bark orders. And not that he was being rude about it, but it's like, dude, can you say good morning? Like, and I would go up to, and I will say, and I don't mean to brag or anything, but I had a friend there once and she said, you can completely tell the difference in their body language and how they react to you versus how they react to that herd manager. Because I would go in the parlor and do I have a crap ton of fresh cows to sort? Yeah, but I'm still going to start by asking, hey, how are you? How's your family? How's, like, if I knew their kid was maybe struggling in school, like, ¿cómo está? How is so-and-so? Do you need help with that? So it's not just, they're very, very family oriented. And so whenever you strike up a conversation with them, don't go straight to business first. It's a really good way to lose respect.
Yeah. Yeah. The other part that I've noticed is, spending quite a bit of time on dairies in particular, how most a significant number of employees are also really willing to make an effort to try to speak English, even if it's kind of messy. I think they're generally happy to be here, and I think there's some. I think I don't want to say maybe the word pride isn't right, but there's some pride in being able to speak English, and most often they try, and I think that's we really need to be able to do the same thing.
I agree. The attitude is, oh, they're here, they need to learn English, and I was like, actually, the majority of them do, but up until really what I'm trying to do is the best that we've been able to do, and it still flabbergasts me because for decades we've been employing immigrant labor, and the best we've been able to do is, here's a community college course at 4:00 in the afternoon that nobody's going to make. 1, 2, we're going to teach you touristy Spanish or English. So how is that going to help you? So that's another reason. It's like I saw this need and I'm like, okay, well, by the way, it's a lot bigger undertaking than I thought, but I'm still working on it. So you are right though. They do want to learn. We just need to give them the opportunity to learn. And can I just say, this is fairly new. One of the biggest struggles that I have with what I do is convincing employers to make the time and pay for it. Like, if you're going to offer professional development for all of your other employees to go learn a skill or do this or do that, learning a language is also a skill. Try to find some way where you can put that into their schedule so that they can still be paid to do that. Because otherwise, with our work schedules in agriculture, it is a very, very big challenge. So
yeah, I would think things like that make a difference, especially because it's no mystery that you could lose a good milker to a new dairy being built down the road for $1 more an hour after you've already invested time in training someone, and if it means getting them to speak English and hanging on to them and letting them have some sense of worth and being part of the program, I think that's pretty huge.
The farmer that I currently teach the ESL classes through, I will never forget when I first met him. So somebody put us in contact because he was looking for an ESL teacher. And I asked him, I said, so what do you want me to teach? Because I'm from a dairy. I don't know anything about pigs other than I love bacon. And he said, because I was like, do you want me to, teach pig anatomy? And I will never forget his response. And this is, I wish more people had this attitude. And he said, I mean, you can, but I want them to learn what they want to learn so that they're comfortable living here.
That's awesome.
That's a novel concept, right? And I just
tell a friend.
Exactly. Like I just got goosebumps even retelling that again. And to this day, I have been teaching his employees we're going on 2.5 years, and they're still with him. Why? Because he's investing in his employees.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, that really is. I'd like to go back to something you just mentioned a moment ago, Katie, and that is talking about offering time during their working hours to learn a language and to pay them for that. And I just think about, we know that family is one of the most important things in the Hispanic culture, as you've shared. So I think that really gets to become a competing interest if it's not offered during the workday. I've worked all day on the dairy. I'm going home to my family. I can go home to my family, or I can choose to go attend this ESL class, which my employer may be paying for, but that means an hour or two tonight that I don't get to spend with my family, and they're very important to me. It's just a lot of things to consider, and that's something that came to mind for me right away as you were sharing that.
You hit it right on the head. That is the biggest challenge that I'm up against. I have farms that are interested, but they're like, oh, well, we can do it at 7:00 at night. And I'm like, no, you need to rearrange something for at least a small period of time. I'm not asking you to do this forever, but if you show a little bit of effort for just, a period of time, you have no idea how much this is going to pay off for you.
Certainly. I'd like to zoom out a bit. We've gotten into some of the details of what you do and some really great real world examples for our listeners. But I'd like to zoom out. Well, like I said, you mentioned earlier that if someone asks you to do something, you ask why, because you're a curious individual. Well, I'm going to ask you why. Why do you do what you do?
That's an easy answer. So in agriculture, we talk about the gap, right? We talk about the gap between farmers and the non-farming public. We are still less than 2% of the population. There's a lot of people out there to educate about what we do. But I started to see the gap within agriculture. And I got to the point where I'm like, is nobody else seeing this? And what I was seeing was Hispanics versus non-Hispanics. And I saw it in wage disparities. I saw it in how they were treated on other farms. I also do another presentation on this. It's called Reaching Across the Cultural Border. And I have my favorite slide in this whole deck is very controversial. I know it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and I tell people that before I go over it, because there are legit exact quotes that I have on this slide from farmers that I'm like, this is not okay to say. And I'm just going to share one of them with you right now. And that is, we have Mexicans. It doesn't seem very offensive, but I'm here to tell you it is. And so I was at a farm once, I was translating, and I asked the farmer, I said, so where are all of your workers from? And he goes, oh, we have Mexicans. And I'm like, oh, so are they all from Mexico? And he goes, well, no, I don't think so. And I was like, okay, well, then you can't call them Mexicans. Like if somebody's from Honduras, they're Honduran, so on and so forth. And actually, my students took this a step further, because I presented the presentation to them because I wanted their feedback. And I'll never forget Alejandra saying, I feel something different about this. And I was like, oh, yeah, well, please share. And he said, I hate it when farmers say this, because I feel like an indentured servant. Like they don't ever say we have Americans. And it took me, like I sat back in my seat and I was like, I never thought of it like that. So anyway, hearing things like that in the industry, and then speaking with the Hispanic workforce about, and it takes for a while for them to open up, because they didn't know what my MO was. They were like, is this chick trying to get us fired? Or the wage disparities really bothered me. I'm part of some agricultural Facebook groups, and it just happened the other day. And I'm like, guys, it's 2024. Somebody was asking, what do you pay your, I love this. She said Spanish workers. I wanted to be like, are they from Spain? Nope, probably not. What do you pay your Spanish workers versus American workers? And I was like, I'm sorry, is there a different, like, in my opinion, if somebody is there for the same amount of time, they have the same work experience, they have the same skills, why are you paying them different? Just because they speak a different language?
It sounds illegal, actually.
It is. It absolutely is. But people can
Sounds
get
like
away
prejudice.
with it. Some people can get away with it because, especially if they're not here on a visa program. So anyway, I was witnessing this gap within agriculture, and it didn't sit well with me. And I started to ask myself, okay, well, how can I fix this, right? There's obviously a need in the industry, and it's not just a language barrier. It is a cultural barrier. Like you guys started off, the first question was about cultural differences. And that's one thing that we don't even think of, I think, especially in agriculture. So that is why I do what I do. It started as a side hustle because I just felt there was a need. So I would be at the dairy all day. Well, let me back up. I was teaching full-time Spanish at the high school, at the dairy in the evening, also running an ice cream business. And then I was like, I'm going to start this in my free time. That was air quotes. And it took off like wildfire. And it is now expanding into that ESL venture because the whole purpose of what I do is let's meet in the middle, right? English and Spanish. And so far, I mean, it's, I don't even know where to go with this because it's so rewarding to see what my students do in the future. I still get emails from students that took my class 6 years ago, and they're like, you'll never believe what happened today. Right. So that's why I do what I do.
That's great. It really is. And I appreciate that as soon as I asked the question, you said, well, that's an easy answer. You clearly know why you do what you do. And that's so important for all of us as we look at how we utilize our time and our skills. So
Yeah.
I'd like to follow up, Katie, with all that being said, what is next in store for AgvoKate as you look at the future?
Oh, that's a good question. My dad's like, you're going to have to hire somebody. I was like, I know. It's a scary point where I'm at right now. Scary, but exciting. I don't know how to answer that question. I keep improving my Spanish courses. I keep, really the ESL is what's growing right now. Both of them are growing. I can't say one's not. I think for me, really the biggest hurdle is convincing employers to make the time for professional development, whether it's for themselves and the English speakers to learn a little bit of Spanish or vice versa for Hispanics to learn English. I'm a type of person where I go with the flow and I accept opportunities as they come. So in between teaching Spanish and English as a second language, I love getting up on stage and talking about this. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm a little passionate about this.
Just a little bit.
I want all of our listeners to know, see, we're here in the video studio, and Brock and I can see Katie. None of you can. And, talking about this, she's just come alive. And so it's clear that she has a passion for this.
I used to say that the ag industry would be severely crippled without this segment of the workforce. And I have since redacted that to say we would be non-existent without this workforce. So we really need to be doing everything that we can to build those bridges between us and become more inclusive. And, I know I say this a lot, but as progressive as we are in agriculture, especially with our technology adoption, we are not so quick with our mindset and our attitude changes. And it needs to become more of a norm to be like, oh, hey, I didn't know that about your culture. I didn't know that about your holiday. Will you tell me more? Will you show me more? And I can't tell you, like I actually take any of the stories that my students send me and I put them in a Word doc, because I'm not unlike a lot of people where sometimes I get stuck and sometimes I question myself of like, is this supposed, am I supposed to be doing what I'm doing? Am I in life where I'm supposed to be? And when I go back and review those stories, and a lot of them are about respect. I had one student, she took both levels. I do a basic or a beginner's and an intermediate course. She took both courses, didn't hear from her for a while. 6 months later, I get this email out of the blue and she said, because I'm communicating a lot more, they are inviting me to every one of their kids' birthday parties. They asked me to be on their emergency care card just to make sure that there was another person. Like that's just one example. Another real quick one, because I love this one. This just happened last winter. I had a farmer take my course, and we had just done numbers. And when we do numbers, we practice like we were reading ear tags. And it was like a week after, so we're like halfway through the course, and he emails me, he's like, so I sorted cows with Juan today, and he was so impressed that I was sorting cows in Spanish. He's like, you should have seen the smile on his face. And I was like, this is awesome. That's great.
Yeah, that is really great. Well, to be certain, as citizens, we want a healthy and reasonably priced food supply, and it's clear that Hispanic labor is an absolute huge part of that. Second part of that is anybody that's here in the United States, we want them to be fully functioning, contributing people to society, and everything that you're doing in terms of ESL, it just does that. And I think then kind of coming back to what I said first, I think it's important for people to know that just the magnitude of 78% of your food is handled by Hispanic labor. And, if those folks were to leave tomorrow, it would literally bring the United States to its knees. And so we sure hope that doesn't happen. And we sure hope you continue to do what you do. So how, as we kind of wrap up here, how can producers get a hold of you? We have producer listeners. And so talk about how producers can get a hold of you, and then just go into a little bit more about species, commodities, et cetera, that you're familiar with, and promote yourself.
Okay. The best way to get a hold of me is my website, AgvoKate. So it's like agriculture and then Kate. So AgvoKate.com. My email's on there. There's a wait list you can sign up for. I do the Spanish classes twice a year right now. The sectors that I currently have, so I didn't even go into that. All of the curriculum that I wrote myself. And that is coming from literal boots on the ground work. Now, obviously that's dairy. And then when I branched into swine and poultry, I did farm visits. I sat down with not only managers, like the English speaking managers, but I also asked to sit down with the Hispanic workers, because I don't know if you know this, but there's a different way to say chicken, whether you're from Dominican Republic or Honduras. So that is, I tried to encompass all of that in this curricula. So I have dairy, swine, poultry right now. Now that is not to say if you're in a completely different sector right now, because I am working on other curricula. I am working on other curricula. If you're, say, in the equine industry or the produce industry, these classes are still going to suit you well. Is there, for example, in my dairy class, your first list is going to be cow, heifer, bucket, but it's also general ag terms too. So gate, pipe, I'd have to have a list in front of me right now, but to load, to unload, to stack, like everything is agricultural centric, no matter what sector that you're in. What else was I going to say with that? I am working on a produce sector right now. But again, those three, the dairy is my most popular. If I have more people interested, I have to have the interest in order to know which classes to offer. So if you're in swine or poultry especially, let me know, because I haven't run those classes in a while, because I need to know that there's interest still out there. I know there is. I don't think I'm in the right arenas to market. So I do a beginner's class and an intermediate. Also, in addition to ag terminology, we're also learning basics. I mean, how often are you trying to explain to somebody what color the bucket is or what color the leg band means? Numbers. One of my favorite lessons is prepositions: to the right, to the left, to the front, to the back. I mean, I really want people to take a moment. Maybe it's today, maybe it's tomorrow. Catch yourself when you're using just everyday terminology. That's what we cover in these classes. I have designed these so that you are literally speaking Spanish. I mean, day one, you can. We're putting simple sentences together by week 3. week 3. I also have a lot of veterinarians that take these courses because, and it keeps increasing every year, which is very humbling. And I asked a couple students that one time who were veterinarians, and they said, because every time we go to a farm, the first person of contact is no longer an English speaker. They're usually Spanish speaking. So I need to learn how to say, where is the cow? Or I need to learn how to, the best I can, give instructions in Spanish of aftercare for this cow after we did a surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So my website's the best way to find me. The ESL part, it's still a growing, everything is still growing. I am a one-woman show. So I am like my tech department, my marketing department. Everything's always a work in progress, but I would love to have conversations if you are interested in both Spanish and or English as a second language.
And I can say, just again, going by your passion for this, I could say that it doesn't matter what breed, species, commodity, whatever. If there's a need for ESL, you're going to figure it out. I'm totally confident in that.
I just wrapped up a very cool opportunity at a horse racetrack. And the cool part for me is, like, I tell everybody, estoy aprendiendo siempre. I am always learning. I had to learn racetrack terminology. I had no clue, but it was like the most fun 4 weeks of 2024, to be honest. So yeah, if you're in an industry that I haven't even mentioned, I'm not scared. Let's go.
That's awesome.
That's great. Katie, I would like to say thank you so much for your time today to join Andrew and I. Your passion has definitely shown through in this conversation, and I know our listeners will enjoy this as well. So a big thank you to you from all of us at Sustaining the Herd.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. Now I'm all fired up.
That's great. And for all of our listeners, thank you, whether you're a new listener or returning, for choosing to spend some time with us today for the first episode of Season 2. We say thanks for joining the herd today, and we look forward to being back with you again in 2 weeks for another fun episode.